Well, 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 it's finally come to this. The siege of Rafah is almost upon us. Israel has been building towards this moment really since October 7th. Almost immediately after that inciting event, Israel began the siege of Gaza City and told all the civilians in Gaza City, which is where everyone lived in Gaza, hey, if you just go to the southern half of Gaza, get out of the city. If you're a good person, go to the south. We'll leave you alone. We just need to fight the terrorists. And they're all in Gaza City for the most part. And so they've been doing that. And now Gaza City has been completely leveled. Over half of all the buildings in the entirety of Gaza have been razed. People are living in tents or out in the elements. And from what I gather, there's just not much left for Israel to blow up in the north. And so now they've had to turn their sights on the southern half of Gaza, namely Rafah, which was that's the major settlement to the south. And supposedly there are 1.5 million people who now live in and around Rafah in one state or another. Before the war, there were about 250,000 people who lived in Rafah. So their population has about sextupled. But now not even Rafah is safe, and Israel has begun bombing the city. So what do you do? If you're a Palestinian, you live in Gaza, you can't go anywhere else. You're not allowed to go to Israel. You can't cross the border into Egypt. You've been displaced, most likely, from your home in Gaza City. Even if you went back, somehow the Israelis let you go home, which now the Israelis, it's pretty ironic. They're telling people, oh, well, now we've cleared out the terrorists in the north, so you guys can go home now. You have no home to go back to. But even if you did, I wouldn't trust that, because they told you to go south, you'll be safe. Now they're telling you, oh, go back north, you'll be safe there. Obviously not. And so this is what we call a kill box. These people are completely exposed, out in the open. They already evacuated their homes, so they can't even, barricade themselves in there. And there's not going to be any urban warfare, because all the people left the urban area, and now they're out living in the open, ripe for the slaughter. And so from the beginning, when they started pushing people towards the south, I think that Israel's intent was just to essentially bum rush Egypt. I think they were trying to push people into Egypt and make the Palestinians Egypt's problem. Egypt has not budged. Egypt does not want to take on a couple million abject, impoverished new citizens who they're going to have to feed, as well as house and clothe and educate and all of this, and people who, by the way, are not Egyptian. I know over here in the West, perhaps all of these Arab nationalities blend together for people, and they go like, oh, well, what difference does it make? And as it turns out, it makes a big difference to the people who live there. I can't really think of a good analogy. I thought of a couple, but perhaps I think they're probably too obscure. For the average American who can't comprehend, different Arabs, all of a sudden, seeing themselves as different peoples and not necessarily just wanting to embrace them and not wanting a bunch of illegal immigrants rushing their border. Just because you speak a mutually intelligible language, just because you speak even, very, very almost the same language, similar dialects, which I believe they don't. I believe, anyway, they have different cultures. They are from a different place. And generally speaking, no matter where you are in the world, people do not like a big rush of immigrants at their border. They don't like it any more than we do. That would be very unpopular in Egypt, or else it would have happened by now. I mean, hell, even look at Russia. Putin did everything he could to keep the Donbass inside of Ukraine. He did not want to let all of those people, even though they are Russians, in eastern Ukraine who wanted to be a part of Russia. Putin was not trying to go that far. From 2014 all the way up until 2022, that to me seemed very clear that's not what he wanted. That was the last resort. And it's probably for similar reasons. He doesn't want to take in a bunch of poor people who are now Russian citizens who his government's gonna have to pay for now. He's gonna have to pay their pensions. Russia's now gonna have to maintain their roads. Russia's gonna have to fund their schools. Russia's gonna have to maintain their all of the rest of their infrastructure, their power grid, their water. But in the case of Egypt, they'd just be getting the people, because it's not like Israel wants to give Gaza back to Egypt, and I don't think Egypt even wants that. I don't think that, because they gave it up to begin with. But Israel wants them to take all the people, none of the infrastructure, not that there's any infrastructure left. Everything in Gaza, at least half of it, has been blown up. Now it just seems that Israel's going to continue bombarding these people no matter where they go, because, well, there's always going to be terrorists among them. Because after all, the more you bomb these people, the more terrorists you create. Because every time you have someone whose mother or brother or sister or father or uncle or grandfather or grandmother gets killed by an Israeli bomb, in the name of anti-terrorism, well, that person all of a sudden gets pissed and says, you know what? I don't give a damn. I tried playing by the rules. I tried, keeping my head down. That didn't work. Now they came and killed my family, and so I'm going to go kill them. It's usually as simple as that. That's how it worked in Afghanistan. I mean, everyone remembers Stanley McChrystal, I believe it was, who came up with the term insurgent math. You kill 5 insurgents, and you end up creating 20. It should be very easy logic for people to understand. We understand it when it comes to 9/11. We say, oh, well, look, 1 million Iraqis were killed in the Iraq War. And they go, yeah, well, 3,000 of our guys were killed in 9/11, and so we wanted to go kill a bunch of them. And that was just, even though Iraq, of course, had nothing to do with 9/11, but the average American didn't know that at the time, probably still doesn't know it now. But that was the attitude. They said, well, they killed our guys, we're going to go kill theirs. It's like, okay, so we destroyed an entire region of the planet, killed 1 million people in Iraq alone, and you wonder, why they hate us. Well, that's exactly what Israel is going through on a smaller scale. Except it's even dumber when Israel does it, because when we Americans go over, I shouldn't even say we Americans, makes my skin crawl, but I mean that somewhat facetiously. When we, quote-unquote, go over and bomb Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan, sure, we're creating enemies for ourselves, but then we get to come back home to America, where far away from those people. Israel is creating a bunch of martyrs and radicalizing the youth into wanting to join any resistance movement that they can be a part of to oppose Israel. They're doing that right on their own borders. And the Zionists love to come in and tell me about all the bad things that Hamas has done. Okay, yes, everyone recognizes, yeah, Hamas, not good guys. But what you're doing, clearly, from the very beginning, is just going to create more of them. And if they weren't called Hamas, let's say you kill everyone who calls themselves Hamas. Just like, remember the PLO? Remember those guys? Yeah. They're not around anymore. And then Hamas replaced them. And, largely with help from Mossad, but let's leave that out of it for now. You don't even have to bring that up. Let's say Hamas disappears tomorrow. You wipe them all out. A new group with a new name is just going to pop up to replace them. You know why? Because in the process of eliminating Hamas, you created way more enemies for yourselves than existed at the very beginning. And this cycle, this process has been ongoing. Going back even before 1948, I'm sure. After all, Israel is a good example of how you can lose your country through mass migration. That's what happened to the Palestinians. Over the course of a few generations, a bunch of mostly European Jews, although some from other parts, some from Africa and the Middle East, all moved into this very small area and quickly rivaled in numbers the population of the people who had lived there, for a few thousand years. and then started asserting their own interests over the interest of the native population, insisting, no, we are the true native population, even though they were mostly born in Europe. And now they run the show. And the same thing can happen here. It's ironic. Most of the people who are worried about mass migration in the West tend to be fairly friendly towards Israel, even though Israel is a great case study. So anyway, it's interesting. Those two factors, strong themes, I guess you could say, in modern Israeli history, are very much in opposition to each other. You have the very smart strategy of bum rushing the population, overwhelming them with numbers, offering complete open immigration to anyone of not even necessarily Jewish faith, just someone who can prove Jewish ancestry, which is a very, very broad category. Encouraging them to come to the country, support your political side against the Palestinian population. Arabs don't have the right of free immigration to Israel, of course. And so you have that very smart strategy if you're trying to gain and maintain control over the territory. But then you have this policy of essentially terrorizing the Arabs over the course of many decades, and breeding not just a mild resentment, but a true hatred, an absolute adversarial relationship between every Arab born within Israel's borders or the borders of Gaza and the West Bank, which are effectively Israel, have been for longer than I've been alive. They're a part of Israel, they're just administered differently. They are Bantustans, plain and simple. But the difference is that back in the old days of apartheid, the Afrikaners, I think, were much smarter than the Israelis. They just didn't have the same numbers advantage that the Israelis have. If the numbers were as much in favor of the Afrikaners in South Africa as it is in favor of the Jews in Israel, apartheid would still be alive and well today, because the Afrikaners made an effort to not exterminate the other cultures of South Africa, but instead to promote development within those communities and keep them separated, as the name would imply of apartheid. And they tried to stay on good terms and create, leadership institutions within each of the Bantustans. Israel has not done that very well. Israel is not on particularly good terms with the Palestinian Authority or Hamas. And publicly, they've always tried to maintain very adversarial relationships with these entities, even if behind the scenes they were working together and aligned. And the problem with that is that Israel, I think, got greedy. They were not satisfied with all of the territory that they had, from the '67 war. They wanted to eventually spread themselves into all of Gaza and the West Bank, and that is why you have the West Bank settlements, which are inherently unstable. There's a tinderbox. You have groups of people who absolutely are mortal enemies living side by side in the West Bank. And then you have Gaza, which is quite literally, if you look at a map, a thorn in Israel's side. If Israel was smart and wanted to solidify and deepen and strengthen their existence, they would have gone for a two-state solution where Israel is clearly the senior state and Palestine was the junior state. And if at all possible, separate Gaza and the West Bank into two separately administered territories, so that then they could compete with one another, perhaps. Although this is not necessary, it could still work with a single Palestinian state that administers both Gaza and the West Bank. But you would want to build up these places, make them desirable, so that the remaining Arabs within Israel's Israel's de jure borders would want to leave and go to these places and say, you know what, West Bank looks pretty nice. I think I'm going to go live there. Or Gaza's pretty nice. I think I'm going to go buy a beach house. And that's what the Afrikaners would have done, because the Afrikaners just wanted their place in the sun, for their people. And they were, they were realistic enough to understand, okay, we're not going to exterminate the Bantu nations or the Khoisan or the Asians, And so when you call Israel an apartheid state, it's really an insult to apartheid. As hilarious as that sounds, that's just how bad Israel is. And I mean in the objective sense. I don't mean as, oh, they're bad, I don't like them. I mean bad as in, if you have their goals, what they are doing is not helpful to themselves. Everything that Israel likes to say about, oh, the Palestinians, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's Israel to a T. They're just projecting. The Israelis have held most of the cards for most of the history of this conflict. So I think Israel's biggest mistake, probably, in a long line of mistakes, was in propping up Hamas, installing them to begin with, and then ensuring that Hamas was never able to be challenged. They always blame, again, more projection. They blame the people of Gaza for Hamas's existence, saying, well, you should have rebelled against Hamas. It's like, well, who installed them to begin with? Who set up the election, the one fateful election where Hamas won one election and then now they've been in power forever? It's like friggin' Nazi Germany. Hitler won, 1/3 of the vote once, and then he was dictator for life. Hamas won a plurality, not even a majority, once in 2005, when the vast majority of the population of Gaza was not old enough to vote. I've done the math before. It's something like, 27% of the current Gaza population was even old enough to vote back then. And then after that, Israel was like, oh, no more elections for Gaza, because they don't pick good leaders. It's like, so we're just going to make sure that the bad guys who won this one election stay in power forever. And as Netanyahu has said it publicly, that was because, well, it helps us to have some, crazy people like Hamas on the other side of the table, because then it makes it easier for us not to negotiate. The goal is the opposite of apartheid. Apartheid wanted to create stable, reliable, controllable partners on the other side, amongst the other tribes in South Africa, so that they could promote their multi-state solution. Israel's taken the opposite approach. And I think that it's all backfiring on them. I think that's what this is. I don't see things getting better from here. The Zionists, again, like to bring up all the rockets that Hamas, fires into Israel all the time and say, well, isn't that a problem? It's like, yes, it's a problem that you have cultivated this population of, 2.5 million people, or is it 1.5 million people total in Gaza? I can't remember at this point the population of Gaza. It's pretty darn high. You've cultivated this massive population of people who absolutely hate you. And so, yes, that's a problem. And you're not going to be able to undo that problem anytime soon. It's not going away. But you're certainly not going to make it go away by completely wiping out their civilization. Because these are people who are driven by vengeance. And so if you try and get vengeance against them, they're going to want more vengeance or more revenge. Whatever the correct way of saying that is. It's been a long day. They're going to want to kill more of you. You kill more of them, they're killing you because you killed a bunch of their guys. So they want to kill a bunch of your guys. Then you go and kill even more of their guys, and they say, well, we're going to kill even more of your guys. So, I don't really have I don't really have a dog in this fight one way or the other. But I think that's just the facts of the situation. I'd be very happy if everyone could just get on with their lives. But I don't see this de-escalating. The folks in Gaza have nothing left to lose, and the folks in Israel seem hell-bent on finishing the job. It's as simple as that. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.